If I do not get to that operating room in 20 minutes, a woman may not survive the night. Dr. Marcus Allen kept his eyes on the road as he spoke into his hands-free headset, his voice calm despite the pressure building around him. The late afternoon sun hung low above the city skyline, casting long golden reflections across the windshield of his dark sedan. Traffic moved steadily along the four-lane boulevard, brake lights flickering like red embers in the distance. Beside him on the passenger seat sat a secured medical case containing specialized surgical instruments that had been requested only minutes earlier. A faint vibration came from his phone mounted on the dashboard. Another message from the hospital. Another reminder that time mattered. Marcus glanced briefly at the screen. Emergency cardiac surgery. Patient unstable. Surgical team waiting. Estimated arrival 23 minutes. He tightened his grip on the steering wheel for only a second before relaxing again. Panic never helped anyone. In 20 years of medicine, he had learned that calm saved lives. Outside, the city carried on with its usual rhythm. People hurried across crosswalks carrying coffee cups. Delivery trucks rolled past storefronts glowing in the warm evening light. A bus released passengers onto a crowded sidewalk. Yet inside Marcus's car, every minute felt heavier than the last. The scent of clean leather mixed with the faint smell of antiseptic lingering on his navy jacket. He had already completed a 10-hour shift. He had skipped lunch. He had not planned to return to surgery that evening, but emergencies never cared about schedules. His phone buzzed again. This time it was the charge nurse. "Doctor, we are preparing the operating room now," she said. "The patient's condition is worsening." Marcus nodded even though she could not see him. "Tell the team I am on my way. We need you here." "I know." The call ended. For a brief moment, only the soft hum of tires against asphalt filled the car. Marcus exhaled slowly. The fading sunlight painted his hands gold as he adjusted lanes and continued toward the hospital. Then he saw flashing lights in his rearview mirror. Blue and red reflections burst across the glass. At first he assumed the patrol vehicle intended to pass. But seconds later, the lights remained directly behind him. The siren sounded once. Short, sharp, unmistakable. Marcus looked around. There was nowhere immediate to pull over. Traffic crowded both sides of the road. He activated his turn signal and carefully guided the vehicle toward a safe shoulder a quarter-mile ahead. The patrol car followed. The moment his tires stopped rolling, another hospital notification appeared across the dashboard screen. Patient critical. Immediate intervention recommended. Marcus closed his eyes for a second, not out of frustration, out of focus. Across the boulevard, sunlight reflected from the windows of nearby buildings. The city suddenly felt louder, more distant, more urgent. He reached for his hospital identification badge resting beside the medical case. The lanyard felt cool against his fingers. Outside, a patrol officer stepped from the vehicle and began walking toward him. Marcus could already feel precious minutes slipping away. Yet when he looked through the side mirror and saw the officer approaching, he straightened his shoulders, slowed his breathing, and prepared himself to remain calm. Because somewhere across the city, a woman he had never met was fighting for her life, and every decision made during the next few minutes would matter. Officer Daniel Whitman stopped beside the driver's window and tapped lightly on the glass. The fading sunlight reflected across his sunglasses, making his expression difficult to read. Marcus Allen lowered the window immediately and offered a polite nod. Warm evening air drifted into the car carrying the distant scent of food from nearby restaurants and the faint sound of traffic rolling through the city. "License and registration," the officer said. His tone was firm, practiced, and without warmth. Marcus reached carefully for the documents. The hospital identification badge resting beside the medical case caught the light as he moved. "Officer, before we begin, I need you to know that I am a surgeon on my way to an emergency operation. A patient is waiting for me right now." The officer barely glanced at the badge. His attention shifted toward the medical case instead. "I asked for your license and registration." Marcus handed over the documents without argument. Years of working inside emergency rooms had taught him that emotions solve very little when time was running short. The officer examined the paperwork while standing beside the car. Another patrol vehicle slowed as it passed before continuing down the boulevard. Marcus watched the seconds disappear on the dashboard clock. 19 minutes. Then 18. His phone vibrated again. A new message illuminated the screen. Patient condition deteriorating. Surgical team standing by. Marcus swallowed quietly. Inside the hospital across town, nurses would already be preparing equipment. The anesthesiologist would be reviewing charts. A surgical technician would be laying out sterile instruments beneath bright operating room lights. Everyone would be waiting. Everyone except the one person they needed most. Outside, Officer Whitman continued studying the documents longer than seemed necessary. His eyes moved from the license to the interior of the vehicle and back again. "Where exactly are you headed?" he asked. "St. Catherine Medical Center." "For what purpose?" Marcus blinked once. The question surprised him. "I am the attending surgeon." The officer's jaw tightened slightly. "Step out of the vehicle." For the first time, Marcus felt genuine concern. Not for himself. For the patient. He looked toward the dashboard clock again. 17 minutes. The golden light outside was fading into deeper orange. Shadows stretched across the roadway. Cars continued moving around them while his world felt frozen in place. Marcus slowly opened the door and stepped onto the shoulder. The heat stored in the asphalt rose through the soles of his shoes. Traffic rushed past only a few feet away. He stood calmly beside the sedan while the officer circled the vehicle. "Officer," Marcus said carefully, "there is a woman waiting for surgery. I am trying to save her life." The words hung in the air between them. For a moment, the only sound was the steady flow of traffic. Then another vibration came from Marcus's phone. This time the call was from the hospital itself. The screen illuminated brightly against the darkening evening. Marcus glanced down but did not answer without permission. He simply watched the phone ring. Watched the hospital's name glow on the display. Watched valuable seconds disappear. Officer Whitman followed his gaze toward the screen. The call continued ringing. Somewhere across the city, monitors were sounding, nurses were waiting, and a family was praying. Yet standing beside a busy boulevard beneath the fading sunlight, Marcus Allen found himself trapped between duty and delay, knowing that every passing minute was becoming harder to replace. The phone continued ringing on the dashboard, its glow reflecting against the windshield as the last traces of daylight faded beyond the buildings lining the boulevard. Marcus Allen watched the screen for a moment before lifting his eyes toward Officer Daniel Whitman. The officer remained silent, his attention fixed on the vehicle, the medical case, and the calm man standing beside him. Around them, traffic flowed steadily through the evening rush, headlights beginning to replace sunlight as the city shifted toward night. Marcus could feel the weight of every passing second. Not because he feared trouble. Not because he feared embarrassment. Because somewhere inside St. Catherine Medical Center, an operating room stood ready while a patient's condition continued to deteriorate. The phone stopped ringing. A second later, another message appeared. Critical update. Immediate surgical intervention required. Marcus inhaled slowly. The cool evening air carried the smell of gasoline, warm pavement, and distant rain that had not yet arrived. He kept his voice measured. "Officer, may I answer the hospital?" Whitman looked at the illuminated screen. For a brief moment, uncertainty crossed his face. Then it disappeared beneath professional caution. "Not yet." The words landed harder than Marcus expected. He lowered his gaze briefly. Across 2 decades of medical practice, he had delivered difficult news to families, worked through sleepless nights, and stood beside countless patients during the most frightening moments of their lives. Yet standing on the side of a busy road while a hospital waited felt strangely helpless. Another patrol vehicle slowed behind them before continuing on. The flashing lights painted alternating bands of blue and red across the side of Marcus's sedan. The reflections moved across the polished surface of the medical case sitting inside. Whitman noticed it again. "Open the case." Marcus nodded immediately. "Of course." He stepped carefully toward the passenger door and opened it. Inside, neatly organized surgical instruments rested in protective compartments. Stainless steel reflected the patrol lights. Sterile packaging remained sealed. Everything was precisely arranged. Whitman studied the contents without speaking. Marcus saw the officer's eyes move across the instruments, then toward the hospital identification badge resting beside them. The badge displayed Marcus's photograph, credentials, and the title he had earned through years of education, sacrifice, and service. Yet even now, none of it seemed enough to move the situation forward. His phone vibrated once more. This time it was not the hospital. It was Dr. Rebecca Collins, the anesthesiologist assigned to the case. Marcus knew why she was calling. She would not waste time unless the situation was becoming worse. The screen illuminated again. The call remained unanswered. Across town, bright surgical lights were already warming above an empty operating table. Nurses were checking equipment. Monitors were humming softly. Family members were waiting outside with hope slowly giving way to fear. Marcus imagined all of it with painful clarity. Whitman finally looked directly at him. "You seem awfully calm for someone claiming this is an emergency." Marcus held his gaze. The city noise seemed to fade around them. "Because panic does not save lives," he said quietly. "Preparation does." The officer said nothing. The answer lingered between them as another hospital alert appeared on the dashboard screen. This time the message contained only 4 words. Patient condition rapidly worsening. For the first time that evening, even Officer Whitman could not ignore the growing urgency. Reflected in the light of the screen, Officer Daniel Whitman stared at the glowing dashboard screen for several seconds after reading the latest update. The flashing patrol lights reflected across the windshield, washing the interior of the sedan in alternating shades of blue and red. Around them, the evening traffic continued moving through the city as if nothing extraordinary were happening. Headlights streamed past in long ribbons of white and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed through the growing darkness. Yet for Marcus Allen, the world had narrowed to a handful of minutes and a woman he had never met. The phone vibrated again. This time the sound seemed louder, more urgent. Dr. Rebecca Collins was calling once more. Marcus remained still, waiting. The glow from the screen illuminated the lines of fatigue around his eyes. He had been awake since before sunrise. He had spent the day treating patients, consulting with families, and making decisions that carried enormous consequences. Yet none of that showed in his posture. He stood calmly beside the vehicle, hands visible, shoulders relaxed, breathing steady. Officer Whitman finally spoke. "Who exactly is this patient?" Marcus hesitated. Medical privacy mattered. Even now, even under pressure. "I can only tell you she is in critical condition and requires immediate surgery." Whitman folded his arms. "That does not tell me much." Marcus looked toward the city skyline glowing beyond the boulevard. The hospital stood somewhere among those lights. Close enough to see, too far away to reach. "It tells you everything that matters." The officer frowned. The answer did not satisfy him. Another notification appeared on the dashboard. Estimated arrival delay exceeding safe surgical window. Marcus felt a small tightening in his chest. Not panic. Frustration. The operating team would be calculating every possible contingency by now. Nurses would be checking medications. Specialists would be reviewing scans. Family members would be sitting beneath bright waiting room lights searching for reassurance in faces that could not honestly provide it. Inside the vehicle, the medical case remained open. Surgical instruments rested beneath the flashing reflections from the patrol car. Their polished surfaces seemed almost symbolic now. Tools designed to save a life sitting motionless while time continued moving forward. Whitman glanced toward them. "You carry those with you?" "Only when I am needed." "And tonight you are needed?" Marcus met his eyes. "Very much." For the first time the officer seemed uncertain. The confidence he had displayed earlier softened slightly. He looked toward the hospital badge resting on the passenger seat. Then toward the repeated calls from St. Catherine Medical Center. Then back toward Marcus. The pieces were beginning to form a picture he had not expected. A cool breeze swept across the roadside, carrying the scent of rain and damp concrete. Overhead, dark clouds had begun gathering beyond the city skyline. Street lights flickered on one by one. The evening was slipping away. Marcus's phone rang again. This time a text appeared immediately after the missed call. "Operating room ready. Patient becoming unstable. Need surgeon immediately." Whitman read the message without meaning to. The words lingered between them. Neither man spoke for several seconds. Traffic rushed past. Patrol lights flashed. Somewhere far away, medical monitors continued sounding. Marcus lowered his eyes briefly before looking back up. There was no anger in his expression. No resentment. Only concern. "Officer," he said quietly, "I understand you have a job to do. So do I. The difference is that someone may not survive if I do not reach mine soon." The word settled heavily into the evening air, and for the first time since the stop began, Officer Daniel Whitman found himself questioning whether the delay he had created was becoming a problem far larger than a routine traffic stop. Officer Daniel Whitman looked away from Marcus Allen and toward the stream of headlights moving through the evening traffic. The city seemed different now. Louder. Heavier. The flashing lights from the patrol car no longer felt like symbols of control. They felt like a countdown. Rain clouds continued gathering above the skyline, turning the horizon a deep shade of blue-gray. Marcus stood quietly beside his sedan, hands relaxed at his sides, his medical case still open on the passenger seat. The surgical instruments reflected the patrol lights like small mirrors. His phone remained silent for several seconds, and somehow that silence felt worse than the constant notifications. Inside St. Catherine Medical Center, people were waiting. Every minute of delay widened the distance between preparation and action. Whitman shifted his weight and studied Marcus more carefully. The expensive suit jacket beneath the physician's coat was neatly pressed despite the long day. The identification badge appeared authentic. The hospital calls were clearly real. The medical instruments were exactly what Marcus claimed they were. Yet something inside the officer resisted letting the situation go. Years of training had taught him to trust procedure. Years of experience had taught him to question appearances. Marcus could see the internal conflict unfolding across the officer's face. He did not interrupt it. He simply waited. A few feet away, the second patrol officer leaned against his vehicle and quietly monitored the scene. The air smelled faintly of rain and warm asphalt. Overhead, streetlights cast pale circles onto the roadway. Another vibration finally broke the silence. Marcus looked down. This time the message came from the hospital administrator. "Emergency family requesting surgeon arrival update." Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Somewhere inside the hospital, people who loved the patient were sitting beneath fluorescent lights, staring at clocks, hoping for news. He imagined a husband pacing a waiting room, a daughter holding a paper cup of coffee that had long gone cold, a family searching every face that emerged from the surgical wing for answers. Those moments were familiar to him. He had witnessed them hundreds of times. Whitman noticed the change in Marcus's expression. It was subtle, barely visible. Not fear. Not frustration. Sorrow. The kind that came from knowing someone else was suffering while you stood powerless to help. "Who is waiting for this surgery?" Whitman asked quietly. Marcus shook his head. "I do not know the family. Personally." He looked toward the city lights again. "But they are waiting all the same." The answer lingered in the cool evening air. For several seconds neither man spoke. Then the radio clipped to Whitman's shoulder crackled unexpectedly. A dispatcher relayed routine updates from another part of the city. Traffic conditions. A minor accident. Street closures. Ordinary information. Yet one detail caught the officer's attention. St. Catherine Medical Center was mentioned among the updates. Whitman's eyes narrowed slightly. He reached for the radio and listened more carefully. Marcus remained still. The second officer also turned toward the transmission. The message was brief and professional, but it confirmed one important fact. The emergency at the hospital was very real. When the radio fell silent again, Whitman slowly looked back toward Marcus Allen. For the first time since the stop began, uncertainty no longer dominated his expression. Something else had appeared in its place. Concern. And as distant thunder rolled softly beyond the city skyline, the realization began settling over him that the consequences of this delay might extend far beyond the side of a highway. The rain had begun in earnest, tiny droplets bouncing off the roof of the patrol car and the hood of Marcus Allen's sedan, creating a staccato rhythm that filled the space between him and Officer Daniel Whitman. Each flash of the patrol lights cast long, fractured shadows across Marcus's face, highlighting the calm determination that contrasted with the officer's growing unease. Traffic moved past in blurred streams of red and white, unaware of the tense standoff unfolding on the side street. Marcus's eyes flicked briefly to the medical case on the passenger seat, where the instruments inside gleamed sharply under the alternating light. The faint scent of antiseptic mixed with the wet asphalt outside, creating an almost surreal contrast between his urgent reality and the mundane city evening. Whitman adjusted his stance, his boots squeaking lightly against the damp pavement, and cleared his throat, struggling to maintain a semblance of authority while the implications of the situation weighed on him. Marcus's phone vibrated, drawing a glance toward the screen that displayed another urgent message from the hospital. The patient's condition was deteriorating, requiring immediate surgical intervention. Whitman caught the movement and saw the faint tightening around Marcus's jaw, the deep inhalation that betrayed the calm exterior, signaling the weight of responsibility pressing on him. He shifted slightly, sensing the moral gravity in front of him, and for the first time considered that this was more than a routine stop. The glow of streetlights reflected off the wet surfaces, bouncing across Marcus's focused eyes, his badge subtly visible beneath his coat, a testament to the authority and experience he carried silently. Around them, the hum of the city continued, but a tension lingered, palpable, as if the universe itself paused to witness the decision unfolding. The second officer, standing silently behind the patrol car, glanced nervously at the dashboard, noting the timer indicating how much critical time had passed since the emergency call. Marcus did not speak. He only stood steady, a pillar of quiet urgency, waiting for the officer to reconcile procedure with compassion. Thunder rumbled softly in the distance, harmonizing with the rhythmic drumming of rain, heightening the sense of suspense. Whitman's fingers twitched near the radio, torn between his duties and the realization that every moment lost could tip the balance between life and death. He finally exhaled, acknowledging silently that the man before him was no ordinary civilian, that his role carried stakes far beyond any protocol. The lights, the rain, the cityscape, all seemed to compress into a singular, almost cinematic focus on Marcus Allen, whose presence demanded trust, understanding, and immediate action, reminding everyone present that human life's fragility outweighs rigid adherence to rules, and that the choices made in these fleeting minutes would echo far beyond the asphalt and flashing lights. Marcus Allen shifted slightly, the rain dampening the edges of his coat but failing to touch the calm resolve in his expression. Officer Daniel Whitman's gaze lingered on him, torn between the unyielding rules of protocol and the undeniable urgency reflected in Marcus's eyes. Each flash of the patrol lights flickered across the medical case, making the surgical instruments glint like distant stars, a reminder of the life waiting inside St. Catherine Medical Center. The city around them moved indifferently, horns blaring, tires splashing through puddles, pedestrians huddling beneath umbrellas, yet none noticed the gravity of this moment unfolding on the empty side street. Marcus's breathing remained steady, but the subtle tightening of his jaw betrayed the awareness of every second ticking away. Whitman's fingers hovered over the radio, unsure if he should call for clarification or simply step back and trust the man before him. A distant siren pierced the night, its wail slicing through the patter of rain, echoing the growing pressure of time. Marcus glanced at the phone once more, confirming the hospital's update. The patient's condition was worsening. Each minute lost a potential turning point. His hands rested lightly on the edge of the car door, poised yet composed, a delicate balance between tension and control. The second officer shifted uneasily, glancing between Marcus and Whitman, sensing the silent negotiation that needed no words. Streetlights reflected in the wet asphalt, illuminating the officer's contemplation, his posture stiffening as realization settled in. Marcus Allen was no ordinary man, and this was no ordinary stop. Whitman exhaled slowly, absorbing the weight of responsibility pressing down not just on Marcus, but on himself, as the city's hum faded into a backdrop for the human drama unfolding. The distant rumble of thunder underscored the unspoken truth. The difference between action and inaction could ripple across lives waiting in the sterile fluorescent glow of the hospital. Marcus did not speak. His calm presence was a silent plea, a demonstration of trust in human decency over rigid authority. Each droplet of rain seemed to mark the passage of critical moments, falling rhythmically as though in sync with his heartbeat, his unwavering focus creating a protective aura around the delicate balance of life and duty. Whitman finally stepped back slightly, nodding subtly, acknowledging the unspoken agreement that the path forward required prioritizing life over procedure. The world continued, indifferent and rushing, but in this small, rain-soaked space, clarity emerged through patience, empathy, and a shared understanding of the stakes, crystallizing the moral weight of the choices made here, and the quiet courage of Marcus Allen standing firmly in the storm. The night air was thick with tension as Marcus Allen moved deliberately toward the hospital, the rain tracing rivulets down the windshield of his car, blurring the city lights into a watercolor of urgency and uncertainty. Each step seemed to echo, the wet pavement amplifying the rhythm of his heartbeat as he carried the weight of an unseen responsibility, the medical kit in the passenger seat a silent testament to the life waiting for him. Officer Daniel Whitman's presence remained a constant, a shadowed figure in the reflection of the side mirror, hesitant yet unyielding, caught between authority and the undeniable truth of the emergency. Marcus's gaze remained fixed ahead, eyes narrowing slightly as he processed the critical timeline, calculating routes, anticipating obstacles, every decision layered with precision and calm. The hum of traffic, punctuated by distant sirens, created a symphony of urgency, each note pressing against the fragile barrier between procedure and compassion. Whitman's stance shifted subtly, acknowledging the silent communication passing between them without a word, the officer's fingers brushing the radio as if weighing the gravity of intervention versus restraint. The street lamps cast fragmented light across Marcus's focused expression, the reflections catching the edge of his badge, subtle but affirming the authority he carried not just in title but in action. The patient's condition, deteriorating with each passing moment, hung over the scene like a specter, demanding clarity and human decency in the face of rigid rules. Marcus's breathing was measured, the calm in his demeanor a stark contrast to the storm outside, the rain's rhythm blending with the pulse of responsibility that guided his every motion. Whitman finally shifted fully to the side, stepping back just enough to allow the man before him to act, understanding that protocol must yield to the immediacy of life. In the distance, the hospital's lights glimmered through the rain, a beacon that drew Marcus forward with unwavering determination, the urgency mirrored in the subtle tightening of his jaw and the precise alignment of his hands on the wheel. Around them, the city moved in oblivion, unaware of the moral weight pressing down on the quiet figures at the side of the street. Yet everything seemed to slow in those moments, framing Marcus Allen as the embodiment of focus, responsibility, and the unspoken courage that defines human decency. Every droplet on the windshield, every flicker of light, every hesitant breath from Whitman became part of a larger rhythm, a cinematic pause capturing the essence of ethical choice, empathy, and the delicate balance between authority and the sacred imperative to save a life. Marcus Allen's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter as the hospital's neon lights flickered through the sheets of rain, each flash reflecting the intensity of the moment and the stakes that hung in the air like a fragile thread ready to snap. The sound of tires skimming puddles became a rhythm, marking the urgency as he navigated streets slick with reflection and tension, eyes sharp, scanning for every sign, every subtle signal that might slow him down. While Officer Daniel Whitman followed behind in cautious observation, the officer's presence a mixture of suspicion and reluctant respect, muscles tensed but restrained, his gaze following the doctor's every calculated move, understanding perhaps better than anyone that a life depended on every second, every decision, every fraction of attention. Marcus's mind raced yet remained methodical, the internal clock syncing with his heartbeat, measuring intervals for speed, stoplights, and the critical timing of interventions to come, the rain tracing rivulets down the windshield like frozen rivers, momentarily blurring city lights into streaks of urgency, and he focused through it all, aware of the invisible line between protocol and necessity, balancing duty against the immediate need to act, each breath measured, controlled, projecting calm into the storm of noise, reflections, and the unspoken expectations pressing down on him. Whitman's fingers hovered near the radio, hesitating, torn between procedure and witnessing a scenario where empathy demanded suspension of rigid rules, and his subtle nod of acknowledgment towards Marcus was a silent recognition of authority tempered by humanity, a delicate understanding that the law sometimes waits for reason to catch up with urgency. In the back of Marcus's mind, images of the patient, of the critical moments already ticking away, flashed in sharp focus, reminding him that every curve, every cautious maneuver, Every interaction with pedestrians and other vehicles became part of a larger choreography in which precision and restraint could mean the difference between life and death, the city around them moving in oblivious rhythm while these two figures enacted a high-stakes ballet of judgment, speed, and controlled resolve. The hospital loomed closer, a beacon of hope amidst the rain, its doors illuminated, reflecting in Marcus's dark eyes with unwavering focus, and Whitman, sensing the climax of responsibility drawing near, eased slightly, granting the space necessary for Marcus to complete his mission, every subtle gesture and unspoken understanding converging into a singular moment of human coordination and moral clarity, capturing the essence of urgency, ethical choice, and the quiet heroism of an ordinary man acting decisively in extraordinary circumstances. Each second a testament to focus, humanity, and the weight of choices in a city that never stops moving. The automatic doors of St. Catherine Medical Center slid open as Marcus Allen stepped inside, carrying the weight of lost minutes on his shoulders, but refusing to let them distract him from the task ahead. Warm air rushed over him, carrying the familiar scent of disinfectant, polished floors, and fresh coffee from a distant waiting area. Bright fluorescent lights reflected across the marble lobby, turning the rainwater on his coat into tiny points of silver. A surgical nurse was already waiting near the entrance. Her expression revealed everything before she spoke. The situation had become more critical. Marcus moved quickly beside her, his footsteps echoing through the corridor as they headed toward the surgical wing. Behind them, Officer Daniel Whitman entered the hospital moments later, still processing everything that had happened on the roadside. The emergency department buzzed with controlled urgency. Nurses pushed equipment carts through hallways. Physicians exchanged updates in low voices. Monitors emitted steady electronic tones from nearby rooms. Marcus listened as the nurse delivered the latest information. Blood pressure unstable. Condition worsening. Surgical intervention needed immediately. He nodded once. No hesitation. No complaint. Only focus. As they reached the secured doors leading deeper into the hospital, another physician approached carrying a tablet. The concern in her eyes was impossible to miss. "We have all been waiting for you," she said quietly. Marcus accepted the tablet and reviewed the updated scans while walking. Every image confirmed what he already feared. Time had become their greatest enemy. Yet even now he remained calm. That calmness spread through the staff around him like an anchor holding against a storm. Meanwhile, Officer Whitman stood near the nurse's station, rainwater still dripping from his uniform. He watched the activity unfolding around him. Nobody questioned Marcus's credentials. Nobody doubted his importance. Every person seemed relieved simply because he had arrived. The realization settled heavily in Whitman's chest. A charge nurse hurried past carrying paperwork. "Has Dr. Allen reached the operating room?" she asked. Another nurse nodded immediately. "He is here now." The relief that crossed her face lasted only a second before she hurried away. Yet Whitman noticed it. He noticed all of it. The urgency, the trust, the respect. A few yards away, a middle-aged man sat alone in the waiting area with his hands clasped tightly together. His eyes remained fixed on the surgical wing doors. Beside him rested an untouched cup of coffee. Across from him, two family members sat silently beneath the harsh waiting room lights. Fear seemed to hang around them like a physical presence. Whitman looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. He had spent his career responding to emergencies, but standing inside this hospital offered a different perspective. Here, every minute carried emotional weight. Here delays had faces. Marcus disappeared through the final set of operating room doors, exchanging brief instructions with the surgical team as he entered. The doors closed softly behind him. For a moment, the hallway became quiet. Outside, rain continued striking the hospital windows. Inside, the family remained waiting. And standing near the nurse's station, Officer Daniel Whitman found himself staring toward the operating room, unaware that the identity of the woman fighting for her life was about to change everything he thought he understood about that night. The waiting area felt unusually quiet after the operating room doors closed behind Marcus Allen. Rain tapped softly against the tall hospital windows, and the fluorescent lights cast pale reflections across the polished floor. Officer Daniel Whitman remained near the nurse's station, unable to shake the uneasy feeling that had followed him from the roadside. Around him, conversations were hushed. Nurses moved with purpose. Family members sat with folded hands and anxious eyes. Every face seemed connected by the same invisible thread of hope. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Whitman checked the clock mounted above the reception desk. Time felt different inside a hospital. On the road, minutes were numbers. Here they carried emotional weight. A nurse hurried past carrying a chart. Another answered a phone call before disappearing down a hallway. The atmosphere remained calm, yet beneath that calmness was unmistakable urgency. Whitman found himself looking repeatedly toward the operating room corridor. He remembered Marcus standing beside the patrol car in the rain, explaining the emergency with remarkable patience despite the delay. The memory no longer sat comfortably with him. Across the room, the middle-aged man who had been waiting earlier rose from his chair and paced slowly near the window. His suit jacket hung loosely from tired shoulders. He looked exhausted, worried. Every few moments he glanced toward the surgical wing before lowering his eyes again. A hospital administrator approached him quietly. The two exchanged a few words. The man nodded once before sitting back down. Whitman noticed several staff members greeting him with unusual respect. Curious, he stepped closer to the reception desk. A nurse stood reviewing paperwork under the glow of a computer screen. "Long surgery?" Whitman asked politely. The nurse looked up. "Very complicated case." Her expression softened slightly. "Dr. Allen is the best person for it." Whitman nodded. The answer did not surprise him anymore. The family must be going through a lot. The nurse glanced toward the waiting area. Especially her husband. Whitman followed her gaze. "The gentleman near the window?" "Yes." She lowered her voice. "Chief Robert Harrison." For a moment, Whitman thought he had misheard her. The sounds of the hospital seemed to fade. "Chief Harrison?" The nurse nodded. "His wife was brought in this afternoon. Critical condition. Dr. Allen came in specifically for her surgery." Whitman stared toward the waiting area. The police chief. His chief. The realization landed with surprising force. Images from the evening replayed instantly through his mind. The flashing patrol lights. The repeated hospital calls. The unanswered messages. Marcus standing in the rain asking only for enough trust to reach his patient. And all along, the woman waiting inside that operating room was the wife of the man leading their entire department. Whitman slowly lowered his gaze. A heavy silence settled over him. He thought about how easily things could have gone differently. How many opportunities he had been given to listen. How quickly assumptions had shaped his decisions. Across the room, Chief Harrison sat alone beneath the fluorescent lights, unaware of the roadside delay that had nearly kept his surgeon from arriving on time. The chief clasped his hands together and stared toward the operating room doors. His expression carried the quiet fear of a husband who loved his wife deeply and could do nothing except wait. Standing beneath the bright hospital lights, Officer Daniel Whitman finally understood the full weight of the night, and for the first time, he found himself hoping not only for the patient, but also for the chance to make things right. Hours seemed to pass inside the waiting area, though the clock on the wall insisted it had been less than one. Rain continued sliding down the hospital windows in thin silver lines, blurring the city lights beyond the glass. The fluorescent lights overhead cast a soft glow across tired faces and half-empty coffee cups. Nobody spoke much anymore. Waiting had replaced conversation. Hope had replaced certainty. Chief Robert Harrison remained seated near the window, his hands clasped tightly together. Every few minutes he looked toward the operating room doors and then back toward the floor. Fear had a way of making even strong people appear smaller. Officer Daniel Whitman stood several yards away, unable to shake the weight pressing against his conscience. The knowledge sat heavily in his chest. The surgeon he had delayed was now fighting to save the life of the chief's wife. More importantly, he realized, he was fighting to save someone's wife. Someone's mother. Someone's entire world. The titles no longer mattered. A nurse emerged briefly from the surgical corridor carrying paperwork. The room instantly came alive. Family members lifted their heads. Chief Harrison rose to his feet. But the nurse offered only a polite smile before continuing toward another department. The waiting resumed. The silence returned. Somewhere behind those closed doors, Marcus Allen remained focused on the patient lying beneath bright surgical lights. No one in the waiting room could see what was happening. They could only trust. Trust the training. Trust the experience. Trust the calm doctor who had arrived carrying the burden of urgency without ever raising his voice. Whitman found himself staring at the operating room doors again. He remembered Marcus standing beside the roadside in the rain. Not angry. Not defensive. Simply determined. The memory stung now. A hospital administrator entered the waiting area, carrying a folder. She approached Chief Harrison and exchanged a few quiet words. The chief listened carefully before nodding. Relief appeared briefly in his eyes. Not certainty, but hope. Real hope. The administrator then turned toward Whitman. "The surgery is progressing," she said softly. Dr. Allen was able to begin in time. Whitman lowered his head slightly. In time. The words echoed through him. A few minutes later, the operating room doors finally opened. The entire waiting area seemed to hold its breath. Marcus Allen stepped into the corridor wearing surgical scrubs beneath a disposable gown. Fatigue showed in his face, but so did composure. The chief immediately crossed the room toward him. Every eye followed. Marcus removed his surgical cap and offered a small, reassuring smile. "The procedure was successful," he said. Relief swept through the waiting area like sunlight breaking through clouds. Chief Harrison closed his eyes for a moment and exhaled deeply. One hand moved to his face as emotion overtook him. Nearby family members embraced quietly. Tears appeared. Smiles followed. The atmosphere transformed within seconds. Marcus accepted several grateful handshakes before stepping back. His exhaustion was visible now. Yet even then he remained humble, focused on the patient rather than himself. Chief Harrison reached forward and grasped his hand firmly. "Thank you," he said. The words were simple, but they carried enormous weight. Marcus nodded politely. "She still has recovery ahead of her, but the outlook is good." Across the room, Officer Daniel Whitman watched everything unfold. The gratitude, the relief, the humanity, and standing beneath the bright hospital lights, he knew there was still one conversation left to have before this night was truly over. The night had finally settled into a quiet calm after hours of tension and anxious waiting. The hospital corridors were nearly empty, with only a few cleaning staff moving silently in the distance, pushing carts and whispering to each other as they completed their tasks. Inside a private recovery room, the chief's wife rested, her breathing steady, the signs of life returning stronger with each passing minute. Dr. Marcus Allen sat nearby, monitoring the vital signs and adjusting medications with careful precision, his expression a mix of fatigue and quiet satisfaction. Every beep of the monitors was a reminder of the delicate balance he had helped restore. Outside the room, Officer Daniel Whitman lingered, still feeling the weight of the earlier events pressing upon him. His eyes darted around, observing the hushed murmurs of hospital staff, the gentle footsteps in the hallways, and the soft glow of the exit signs casting long shadows on the floor. He reflected on the road that had led here, the moments of misjudgment, and the sudden clarity that had come from witnessing courage and humanity firsthand. He remembered Marcus standing calm in the storm outside, guiding others, saving time, and prioritizing life over confrontation. Chief Harrison emerged from the recovery area, his face marked by relief and gratitude. He approached Marcus, extending his hand firmly but gently, and spoke words that carried the depth of his appreciation. Marcus responded with humility, acknowledging the collective effort and the resilience of the human spirit. In the background, other hospital personnel moved with quiet efficiency, attending to various tasks, maintaining a sense of order and normalcy after a night filled with urgency. Whitman finally stepped forward, approaching Marcus, and they exchanged a long, meaningful look, understanding silently that accountability, empathy, and respect had bridged a gap that mere protocol could not address. The morning light began to filter through the hospital windows, soft and golden, casting a warm glow that illuminated the relief and hope in the room. Conversations began to flow more naturally, soft laughter emerged as family members gathered close, and a sense of closure settled over the once tense environment. Marcus allowed himself a brief moment to rest, leaning back slightly in his chair, but his vigilance remained, always present for the patient's well-being. Chief Harrison remained near, offering quiet support and observing the professionalism and dedication of the doctor who had so decisively influenced the outcome of a life at its most fragile. Officer Whitman, feeling the enormity of the lessons learned and the human connection strengthened, allowed himself a slow exhale, understanding that justice and compassion could coexist, and that respect for life had guided the night to its serene conclusion. The room, once fraught with uncertainty, now radiated stability, hope, and the silent acknowledgment that actions taken in clarity and care could alter the trajectory of lives forever, leaving each witness profoundly changed by the experience.